So if you subscribe to the JSONPath mailing list, you should receive notifications.
Now, this is a new group. I just found only 3 draft in the professional.
Good morning, everybody.
Hello, Glenn.
Morning, Stefan.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Well, we seem to have all of our editors and chairs here. That's good. Should we wait or shall we just start?
Greg is also here.
Oh, right, Greg. I don't see Greg. Oh, there he is. Welcome, Greg. James, why don't we just get going?
Yeah, we can do that. I'll do the usual starting point for the YouTube later. So for the recording later, this is the JSONPath February 2023 interim. As this is an IETF meeting, please note well, and that the rules of the IETF apply to this meeting as it does to other meetings. Ministravia, note takers. I see Carsten's put the notes link in. Thank you. Blue sheets are automatic. I guess we'll keep an eye out for the chat. There's not that many of us. Is there any agenda bashing? Is there anything specifically we want to bring up today?
Right. There was some conversation on the email, and then we do have 4 or 5 issues there.
Yeah.
I think it might be most productive to ask our editors to lead here on selecting the issues that need to be talked through.
Yeah. Glenn and I have brought up a couple issues in the past hour or so that have sparked some heated conversation.
Okay, well, I would welcome a suggestion for a starting point.
Glenn, your mic's not working.
Thank you. Yeah, why don't we go through the issues? There aren't very many of them.
Sure. Where would you like to begin?
Well, can we start with the agenda as you just showed it? Because what Glenn is saying is the third item on the agenda.
Yep, but we've never stuck to a particular order. We can do this in whatever order you'd like, folks.
Actually, Karsten is right. Sorry, I should have. It's the middle of the night for me. I'm having a little trouble getting swapped in here. So, yeah, I would like to informally see if we can set some goals. I think that we are very near the finish line. If you define the finish line as getting this sent off to the IASG and starting the fairly lengthy set of steps from there to the real finish line. So it would make me very, very happy if we could, in the course of this meeting, nail anything down that needs it and send it off to the IASG, ideally sometime like tomorrow, for both of our drafts. I think we're within reach on both of those.
I think that's ambitious.
No, that doesn't work. We haven't had a working class call on the base draft yet.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, you're right. Pardon me. So
we can
let me
ship
rephrase that.
iRegApps, but we cannot ship the base draft.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So first of all, I have reviewed Karsten's most recent update to the regex. Thank you for catching those corner cases on the ECMA expressions and so on. I think it's ready to go. Does anybody want to? Do we have consensus that we can send that one off? James, you have your Shepherd document. It looked like in reasonably good order last time I looked at it.
Yeah. I think they need to update the document Shepherd write-up for that. So that's something that I can take care of offline. And then, yeah, I think we can just ship it.
Excellent. I'm not hearing any objections to updating the document Shepherd doc and then just shipping it.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, so then our objective should be to get ourselves in a position to do the working group last call on the base draft.
What is the base
And-
draft as opposed to like the iteration 10 that recently was published?
The same thing. It means base as
Okay.
opposed to regest.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so that's I think where we stand. Anybody want to disagree with that snapshot of the progress? Fair enough. Now that I'm kind of swapped in, let's go back to where we were and start looking at Karsten, do you want to get in and comment on the agenda first, or should we go to the issues now?
I think we can now go to the issues.
Great. Glenn, where do you think we should start?
Well, I'm hesitant to start at the top because I haven't even read the first one. We could go from the bottom, get the historical ones out of the way first. So obviously 151 is irrelevant.
Wait, I mean, it's relevant, but not for the purpose of this meeting.
151 is, yeah, looking at.
Okay, so so that's not relevant for this meeting. This applies.
Yeah. We could look at
So we'll
366 next, yeah.
Yeah. So in this one, if you look at table 13, it appears to me reading this that we're using the word value in the type column. You just had it. It was just there. Up.
It was. And then trying to, is this the table?
Yeah, that's the table.
Yeah.
There you go. So if you go to the type column, right in the middle, it says value. And that's the type in our type system. And then also in abstract instances, you have value with parentheses and some kind of parameter there. And I think that's meant to stand in for the JSON value of some sort. And using the word value both in our type system and for the abstraction of what that means, I think is confusing. Glenn pointed out in the issue, I think Glenn pointed out in the issue that we do use value for JSON value throughout the document. And so I think that's what it should be. But that means I think that we need to rename the type of value because I think it's a little bit confusing.
Well,
I certainly had to parse it when I was trying to make sense of the table.
it is the JSON value that is meant by value parenthesis v parenthesis.
Right, but we're talking about the one in the left column, right?
Yeah. So I'm fine with the abstract instance. I'm fine with that column. My issue is with the word value in the type column. I think it conflates with the word value in the abstract instances column. I don't think that they're quite the same thing, especially given you have the value true and value false just below. And that's another issue that I just created. So that's at the top of the list. We'll come back to that.
I mean, they're not the same thing at all, because value in the left column is a type, and value in
Right.
the middle column is an abstract instance. So but you're right, they do collide, as it were. The terms collide.
Yeah.
So what would be a good name for the type?
So here's
That's
one
the
straw
rub. I
man
don't know.
suggestion. Here's one straw man suggestion. When I have an enumerated type, I tend to put type on the ends of all the enumerated values. String type, number type, option type. So we could consider doing that, saying value type here.
I think I'm happy with that. It does provide a distinction between the two.
Now then, for consistency, you would want to add that to all of them, and that would make some of them look kind of clumsy.
It would.
Optional node or value type. But I mean, it's clear. It's long variable names aren't terrible. But I don't really care that much, so I'm going to shut up now.
And we did talk in the issue about renaming one of them to JSON value. So I guess that would be the type. But then we probably have to rename optional node or value to optional node or JSON value for consistency. It's a bit long-winded.
Yeah, I think appending type to everything is well, it really hurts, but seems to be the easiest way to get out of this.
I mean, we could be obscure and put T on the end instead of type if we wanted to keep it short, but we've been
Underscore T, underscore T, just like C programmers.
No underscore. Yeah, I mean, we are using Pascal case here. We are not using snake case. So yeah, we could just add an uppercase T at the end. Let's do that.
I mean, that
If the
makes
editors
sense
are
if you
having
know
a-
what the T means. If you don't know what the
Well,
T means, that it provides a
I would agree with
distinction
that.
without any meaning.
Yeah, I agree with Greg's, and I would say if you're going to do that, then you need a note above the table saying the trailing T stands for type.
Yeah.
I see
I
Glenn
don't
nodding.
mind going for type. It seems heavy-handed, but it's clear.
I'm happy with that.
What do you
don't
think?
mind.
Karsten, would you be okay with type? Karsten, would you be okay with type?
Yes.
Okay.
It
Anybody
will create some
disagree?
headache in formatting the other tables, but yeah.
I can go ahead and create a PR for that. It'll probably be tomorrow.
Great.
Okay. Okay, so let us call that issue resolved. Why can't I? Oh, that's the wrong thing. That would take us to issue 368.
And that was 366.
This was 366 that we just talked about.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No, it was 366 we just talked about.
Yes.
366.
It may be useful
Now let's
to look at the notes because I'm trying to capture what we said.
Yeah, let's look at the notes. Hold on.
Yeah.
I'm leaving a note in the issue.
Yeah, I agree with what that says.
Okay.
Except for, oh yeah, okay. Okay, 368.
368.
lot of discussion here. Where did we get to?
Yeah.
I remember this one. So it's to potentially tighten it up to allow greater syntactic compile time checking, and now we're talking about options.
Yeah.
So what would the spec? Would there be a change to the spec then?
No, what we ended up, well, at least with these last few comments, what we ended on was leaving the spec the way it is, and then in my implementation, I'll have like a strict parsing option that if they turn it on, then it will check for things like this, where input values aren't the right type or stuff like that. It won't be spec behavior, but I think that's understood from enabling an option. Generally, when you have a spec implementation and you enable an option, that's understood that you might not be spec compliant anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm fine with that just being an option if we want to be tolerant by default.
I think the important observation is that we have well-defined semantics with the type system we have. And anything we add to that is probably going to be very specific to the specific extensions that are being defined. So it's hard to come up with a general type system in the base document that then will be useful for any further function extension that people will be coming up with. So I think Greg's approach to say this is something that an implementation can do as a quality of implementation feature is useful. And my comment was just to remind people that this is not changing the normative semantics. So that will stay in place, but it's just a useful service that an implementation can offer. So I don't think we actually need to change any text here.
I agree.
Yep. In fact, you can imagine implementations that do all sorts of linting. Somebody brought the word lint up, and be super smart. And in fact, you can even imagine things that are in systems that are known. They know the shape of the JSON instances that are going to be processed, and can be even smarter on that. So I don't think there's anything in the spec that constrains implementations from being super aggressive in type checking.
So what shall we do with this issue? Are we okay to close it?
Yeah, I left it open because it's attached to the test suite changes. I wanted to close it once we merged that. So those new tests will actually, once we merge that PR, then probably several issues can be closed.
Okay.
Excellent. Okay. Everybody happy with that? Any objection to closing this?
No, close it.
Well, I was thinking leave it open until the test PR is merged.
The test PR can reference a closed comment, so that's no problem.
It's fine for the test to lag behind the spec, because that's the usual way, I think.
Shall I close it?
Yes, please.
Yeah, do it.
Yeah,
it's fine.
Okay, that takes us to 385. Is that not a? Oh no, that's not the same as 366.
This is just an editorial correction, actually, at the starting point. We got a little bit sidetracked in the discussion about subtypes by coercion. And it's up to Carsten whether we want to discuss that now.
Yeah, I think...
I don't understand. I read this 3 times and I didn't get it. Could somebody explain what you mean by subtypes by coercion?
We allow a node to be coerced into a value. So if a function requires a value as an argument, and gets a node, then the value will be extracted from the node. And that only works for optional because everything. This is something that I have been calling coercion. And the same thing happens if function returns a node, and that is used in a comparison environment. So like we handle singular paths by essentially taking out the node to affect the comparison, the value of the node to affect the comparison, we would take out the value of the node returned by the function. So we have some coercions that are essentially already implied by the grammar. We have the coercion in the function argument position. And I think we only differ in the use of the term subtype, where I consider this to be distinct from coercion, while Glyn considers coercion to be a part of the subtype hierarchy. And my problem with that is that essentially the hierarchy gets trivial pretty quickly once you do that.
Oh, when you say trivial, do you mean total? Complete. Every type is a subtype of every other.
Yeah, not totally complete, but yes. So essentially, it will be there will be an edge almost everywhere.
Yeah.
I notice in 2.6.1, just above that table, we start using the term coercion, and I don't see where it is defined.
It's defined below table 14, isn't it?
We never actually define the term, so that's
No, we don't define the term, but the substantive thing is below table 14, isn't it? Where those two bullets are the two cases where we do coerce to get subtype.
So could we agree as... Go ahead.
I'd rather say can be used in place of, as opposed to is a subtype of, so we can keep the subtype hierarchy clear and clean, and don't have to mix the two up.
But the problem there is that elsewhere in the spec we say things like this is valid providing the function returns X or a subtype of X. And if we have to then say or a value which can be converted to a subtype of X, it gets a bit wordy.
I have no problem with that. I have no problem with value conversion. I think I prefer that rather than claiming that it's a subtype.
I would like to have a question for understanding. What happens if I want to coerce an empty node list? What will the result be?
It depends on what you're going to. In some cases, it could be nothing.
Well, nothing is an empty node list in my understanding. What exactly is nothing else than an empty node list?
Well, we only defined two coercions actually, and I don't think empty node list fits in either of them.
Okay, I need to think about
that. May be a problem. So in the grammar, we have a separation between singular paths and general paths, which we call filter paths. The function argument position can be filled in by either. So what does this... I mean, essentially, you need to direct the parser to one of those cases.
Well, yeah, there's two. We talk about a well-formedness and validity, don't we, in terms of
Yes.
what makes a correct JSON path. And the parser, I think, will be doing the well-formedness check, checking that the JSON path conforms to the ABNF. And then on top of that, there is a set of validity checks to do with IJSON values and function types. So I think from my perspective, that's kind of post-parsing, but it still gives an error before the before the path has run.
Well, the function argument production says a function argument is a filter path or a comparable. A comparable is a singular path or a function expression. So you are happy with that being ambiguous?
Can we look at this text, because I can't hold it in my head? Which section are we in?
Just search for the word function argument.
Oh, okay, yeah. So that's in 2.6.
So here you see that function argument is a filter path or a comparable.
Mm-hmm. When you go to comparable, which is in 255, scroll down a
Just
bit.
search for comparable equals.
Yeah. Scroll down a bit. There you go. There you go, right in the middle. You see that it's a JSON value, a path, or a function expression.
Yeah, it's a literal JSON value or a singular path or a function expression. While filter path is rel path, a JSON path, or a function expression. So this is all ambiguous, which is not fundamentally a problem. I mean, we can have ambiguous derivations in a BNF. It's just that we do provide some guidance here that the function expression that goes into comparable is supposed to be an optional node or value, and the function expression that goes into a filter path is an optional nodes or subtype. So it does make a difference which of these two derivations we're actually using.
Yeah, I'm not quite clear. It's early in the morning for me. I'm not quite clear what the problem is, though.
The problem is that we may be relying on this comment meaning something when it actually turns out it doesn't mean anything.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, I think that comment is it's pointing at the validity checks to do with subtyping, isn't it? To do with typing. That's where the normative text is, I would say. Down in the function extensions section. Yeah, so that will say a function expression is only valid as a comparable if it returns an optional node or value or one of its subtypes. So if you look at, for example, if you look at 262, then the second bullet in 262 says a function expression which occurs as a comparable is correctly typed if it occurs as a comparable in a comparison and the function is defined to have result type optional node or value or one of its subtypes. So that's amplifying the comment in the ABNF, if you like.
Yeah, but it cannot be decided whether it occurs as a comparable because the grammar has multiple derivations here. So this if doesn't make sense.
Oh, I see. Okay, I think we've got an issue here. I think it's different from the issue we're actually discussing, but we should probably capture it.
I think the issue. Oh, the next GitHub issue actually relates to all of this as well. Subtly.
Okay. I wonder if we can capture this particular discussion as an issue while we've got it in our minds, because it'd be fantastic to nail it down. Or maybe take that as an action after the call if that's too much to ask.
I haven't quite managed to understand it. I'd love to see, you know, some jotted text that explains what the problem is here.
Maybe
I think part
also,
of the problem is. Sorry, go ahead.
I would like to go back to the comparable where function expression is used, where we have been before.
It's 255.
255, yes.
Yeah, you're there.
Yes.
You're there.
No. Yeah, it's fine.
Yep.
Comparable is number, string, literal, true, false, null, singular parse, or function expression. For my understanding, the result of a function expression should be one of the values above. But if function expression is an empty node list, it doesn't fit, because a singular parse, in my understanding, cannot be an empty node list. Am I right?
Yes. A singular path can be an empty node list.
Cannot be, or can be. Can be. Oh, okay. So, so it should be no problem, because function expression will be or can be coerced to one of the above. It's
this gets into the next GitHub issue. Function expression can also return a Boolean, an expression Boolean that is not equal to, that is not the equivalent of the JSON Boolean, which is the true false there. An expression Boolean is like the exists operator. And a function expression can return that. That is not one of those values listed there.
Okay. I slowly understand.
And that's the crux of the next GitHub issue, which we can come to later.
Can we? Yeah, let's take them one at a time, because it's getting a bit confusing.
Yeah, I don't have a solution off the top of my head. I would prefer the parsing to enable prioritized choice. So this can be implemented using a parse expression grammar. So I have a greater aversion against grammar ambiguity than most of you. But I also need to understand whether we are making some semantic assumption of lack of ambiguity where we don't have it.
Can I just check my understanding? If we take something like a numeric literal that's outside the IJSON range, sorry, say a step value in an index expression that's outside the IJSON range, then that's valid in the ABNF. You know, the JSON path is well formed, but it's not valid in the spec because it's outside the IJSON range. Okay. Now, where does that sit relative to your parsing expression grammar concern? Would you want the peg to be able to detect something outside the IJSON range?
Well, I mostly want things to be parsed in such a way that the subtype relationship will enable the use of the result. With your IJSON concern, there really is no parsing ambiguity, so the step number is parsed and handed to interpretation, and turns out to be outside the IJSON range. So that makes it invalid, but not well found.
Okay.
Not well found.
So can we come up with a particular example where the current ABNF doesn't decide the syntax?
Yeah, add is my example.
So could you be a little bit more verbose? At what?
Add the single add sign. That is both a filter path and a singular path. So when you use add as a function argument, then you can go both through the filter path case and through the comparable case, which then goes to singular path.
I haven't quite got there yet. Yeah, I see what you're saying, but I don't see what the problem is.
The problem really is just that when we parse this, we have two different derivations, and I'm not sure that we actually account for this possibility in all of our thinking.
Okay.
So if you look at the comment behind function expr right at the top of the screen, this essentially is telling you that the filter path accommodates function expressions that result in optional nodes or subtype of that. And down at the definition of comparable, it says it accommodates a function expression that is an optional node or value or subtype of that. And first of all, depending on how we define subtype, that actually is maybe overlapping. But it's definitely not something that can be used to resolve this parsing ambiguity. So we cannot really. In other cases, we're using the syntax to cleanly distinguish between filter paths and their derived Boolean semantics and comparables which have an explicit Boolean semantics. And here this kind of breaks down. So I'm just trying to make sure that we can live with this breakdown. So we can make sure that we don't rely on the parser making a decision for us here, which really is one that is based on the return type of the function.
Okay.
One question. Do we use the term filter path anywhere in the spec?
Yes. If you look at the very top.
It's also in the definition section.
I don't know.
Is it also in the definition section?
No.
Where terms are
James,
defined?
if you scroll up just a little bit in the text. Okay, so that top ABNF block defines filter path. Well, too far. Nope. Yeah. Nope. Okay.
Filter path. I see. Yes. Okay.
And it's used about half a dozen times in the text.
Yeah. Okay. This is okay.
But what I'm struggling with is the difference between an existence test and a test expression comparable. can be determined by context by the parser, can't it? So if it looks ahead and sees a comparison operation, then it knows that the term is meant to be a comparison.
That's right.
Is that a problem for a PEG?
Well, the PEG parser will just choose one of those deterministically, while an ABNF, general BNF parser will choose one of them non-deterministically. So life is a little bit easier in the PEG world than in the BNF world, except that you have to make sure that the one that is chosen deterministically is the one that you actually want.
Right, but is there no concept of backtracking? If you make the wrong choice and the thing doesn't parse, then you can try the other choice.
Well, in PEG, if you make a choice and the choice actually works, you're stuck with that.
Okay.
So at some point, I will probably make a PR that reorders some of these in such a way that working parsers always can be stuck with. But that's not my problem right now. My problem is that the grammar itself, of course, is a grammar, but there is a comment in there that seems to explain that we are expecting certain types to occur here. And it's a bit weird to have different derivations that differ in the expectations.
Okay, so playing that back in different words, if we stripped out these comments from the ABNF, then we'd allow function expression in multiple places, in test expression, in filter path, etc. And that would get through the parsing, regardless of the type of the function expression.
Yes.
Yeah, and then we get onto validity checks, and that might then cause a failure.
Right.
Okay.
So, Glenn, just for my sanity here, it seems like you're making the distinction between a parsing and a compiling. So like in C#, I can say true equals 1, and that would probably parse correctly. You get symbols for true and equals and 1. But then when the compiler comes through and checks that syntax tree, it would see that true is a Boolean, 1 is an integer, and it would say you're not allowed to do that.
Yeah, I mean,
is that the distinction that you're making?
But basically, yes. But the way it's phrased in the spec, we talk about well-formedness and validity, and I think they're both syntactic issues. But well-formedness is determined by the ABNF, and validity is determined by some extra rules that we layer on top of your compilation phase, in your terms.
Right.
And
so
a long discussion in the compiler community whether what you just described is actually called semantics or is another form of syntax. So the terms don't help that much.
Yeah. So the reason I bring this up is because if we're talking about well-formedness, I think above way earlier in the spec, and I can look at this later, I do believe that we say that well-formed paths need to execute. But not necessarily semantically valid, or well-formed paths need to be able to execute, even and if they're no,
it has to be well-formed and valid to be to execute. Otherwise, it must give an error, and there's a capital must in there.
Oh, wait a minute.
If we don't make that distinction, we probably should.
No, we make it right at the start.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. It's in section 2.1. Needs to be well formed and valid. Okay.
Okay.
So if we determine that it's invalid, then we still raise an error.
Yeah. The crucial sentence is just after the two bullets in 2.1. The JSON path implementation must raise an error for any query which is not well formed and valid.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the two validity requirements that we have is that the integer numbers that we are using, well, I don't know what are relevant to the JSON path processing actually means, but we can discuss this. But the integer numbers must be sane, and the function extensions must be correctly typed. And that is then delegated to section 2.6. And 261 actually has the text that explains that can we get rid of these unnumbered sections? These are actually driving me crazy. So 2.6.1 has the type system, and it doesn't really say what a filter path or a singular path evaluates to, does it?
No, I mean 262 is where we actually define the validity requirements.
Yes. Yeah, and there are two if it occurs. That are actually looking at the tree and not just at a single occurrence. A filter path in a test expression is different from a filter path that goes into a function argument.
What does a test expression exactly mean here?
Yeah,
Is it a
it's no longer
filter
called test
expression?
expression, right? Oh, it's still called test expression. Yeah.
Yeah.
The grammar rule test-expr.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, test-expr is very interesting, isn't it? Because it's got two branches which take function expressions and which have different effects. So the filter path branch can take a function expression which returns optional nodes. And that's, yeah, but the other one takes a function expression which can only return optional Boolean or a subtype. So we can do the match without an equals comparison. I kind of feel as if we need to go away, wrap a cold towel around our heads and write down some of these issues. It's going to be hard to come up with it on the fly, the precise text. I think there is a problem here.
It might clarify it if we had some example paths that illustrate the problem.
I think we need to make up examples.
Yeah.
But I'll be honest, I don't get it. You guys might as well be speaking Sumerian.
Yeah. Can you scroll to test-expr?
Sorry, which way am I going?
Test-expr.
Maybe do a find for it.
It's in 255.
There we go.
Yeah.
Ah, yeah.
So we see that a test-expr is either a filter path or a function expression. And a filter path is either a path or a function expression.
Yeah, the test expression doesn't need function expression in it. That's redundant.
Well, it's not redundant in terms of the commentary. Yeah, I mean, the big question is, does the parser need to decide which branch to go down? in order to complete the parsing step before we go into the validity check.
Yeah, that would be a disaster.
I think some of this might be resolved if we move on to the next issue, to be honest.
Okay, let's give it a try. Why don't we push this on the stack and see what Greg suggests. See what Greg suggests here. Which is 387, Greg?
Yep. Okay, so I've got some issues linked. We have previously decided that the match function is not a comparable. It is not allowed to be compared using the equals or greater than or whatever functions. It returns a Boolean, and that was decided in 360, and I codified that in a PR in 365. However,
Can I just ask a question? I know that we decided that you could use match on its own without a comparison, but where did we say that you couldn't use it in a comparison?
In 360.
Can we see that, please?
Sure. It's linked right there. Or you can do that. So currently those two examples were in there, and we ended up removing in 365 that second example, the equals true.
Yeah,
and we did this. The argument for this was that match returns a Boolean which is distinct from the JSON value true or false.
I don't agree with that.
No.
Why? We've already determined that comparables return a Boolean that is distinct from true and distinct from JSON true and false. So why is it that
they don't? That was my comment on your issue. 1 equals 2 does not have a type, so we cannot discuss this.
Okay, so if I were to say 1 equals 2 equals 1 equals 1 and put parentheses, you would be okay with that?
No, that's the grammar doesn't allow you to do that.
Why not?
Well, because that's the way we have been doing things. Of course, we can change that, but I don't see a big use case for that. So
right.
Comparable.
I'm not saying that there's a use case for it. I'm saying it's invalid because 1 equals 2 produces a Boolean, an expression Boolean, that can only be used with and or not.
Yeah, but you are now trying to transfer some of the things that we are doing with syntax into the type system. And that is neither needed nor does it work because 1 equals 2 really doesn't have a type. The comparison can only occur in certain places, and in those places it doesn't have a function extension type.
I agree with that statement 100%. What I'm saying is match does not return a JSON value of true or false. It returns whatever it is that 1 equals 2 is.
No, 1 equals 2 is syntactically a comparison. And function expressions and comparisons don't mix. Function expressions can be comparables, but not comparisons.
If that's the case, please, James, please go back to 360.
So Karsten, are you saying that I could write an expression in which I have the match on one side and equals literal true on the other?
I don't have a problem with that expression being well-formed or valid.
Okay. So here's my thing. If the second one is valid, then the first one cannot be valid because the second one says that match is returning true as a JSON comparable value. And then the first one says that it's a test expression, but a test expression cannot have a comparable value in it, according to the ANBF.
Well, we just looked at ABNF that allows that.
No.
Yeah, that's the other problem.
We're saying it has a function expression. Okay, so we're saying it has a function expression. That I get. But what if it returns a string? Then it's not valid in a test expression.
Correct.
It has to return a Boolean in order for it to be returned, in order for it to be valid in a function expression. Yes. And the ANBF does not express that.
No, the definition of the function expresses that. So that's why I said these comments are so incredibly important, because the comment on
the
function in test
comments. The ANBF isn't going to respect comments.
No. But we have to make sure that what we think is happening here is not just covered by a comment, but is covered by actual text somewhere. So it is weird to have the function expression in the position that it has in the test expression.
Okay, so my thing is we have one or the other on my issue that I posted. We cannot on 360. You can have either of those two cases. You cannot have both because of decisions that we've already made.
Can you point to the decision, because I don't know that.
Yeah, you see, my recollection is that we allow the equality option, the second option, but we didn't like the verbosity of it, so we added some special cases so that you could write the match without the equality.
Exactly.
Just, the equality is incorrect. It means it's not needed.
But that contradicts the decision we made earlier to not allow just random values as an existence test.
Yeah, but that's a validity constraint.
Yeah. Exactly. I'm saying it's not valid. One of those two cases has to be not valid.
No.
If you don't have one of those two cases valid, then you just throw away.
Can you go to table 15?
Sorry, hold on. Two people are talking at once. Karsten's turn.
Can you go to table 15? So table 15 supports Greg.
Oh, interesting.
Okay, I actually removed that in 365. So what happened? 365 was merged.
And note that I'm looking at the GitHub version, not the published.
That's where I put that. Yeah, and yes, I added that. It was agreed upon, and yeah, I added this. I changed this, saying it's invalid typing as a result of 360.
Okay.
Yeah, so you essentially are saying that the Boolean value that match returns is not a JSON true or false, but is a different category of thing, like nothing. Nothing is already one value that we allow that is not among the set of JSON values, and we would have a function true and a function false, or a test true, test false, whatever, which are the instances that make up the test Boolean type.
Yes, I'm calling that an expression Boolean, just because that's what I've been calling it. So I see an expression made up of comparisons, which in essence, compile to an expression Boolean, which then can be combined with the Boolean logic operators. The Boolean logic operators have to operate on something.
Yeah, we called these tests somewhere else. So for me,
Okay.
this would be a test true and a test false. But
That's
whatever.
fine with me. Put a label on it. Let's call it a test true and a test false, or a test Boolean. That's fine with me.
I'd like to probe on the sentiment of people looking at this screen right now. That last one that currently is declared to be invalid. What do people think about that? It looks gross to me. Like the literal true just feels like a different flavor of thing than what comes out of a test expression. But what do other people think?
This consequence of this would be to substitute the nothing thing by expression true or expression false, which I do like a bit more. The proportion.
That is not a necessary consequence.
There's another weird consequence that comes out of this. If we take that last example there, the invalid one, and replace true with an @a, then hang on, where'd you go?
Sorry.
Okay, thank you.
If you do an @a, it gets really weird because now you're saying, I don't know, maybe that's a valid use case for this.
Yeah.
I'm not
I mean,
sure.
it's only weird if you already have decided that the test booleans are different from JSON booleans. But if you accept test booleans as equivalent to JSON booleans, then it becomes possible to say equals @.a.
Okay, so then you would have to say that test booleans are, that tests being a comparable with being a comparison or a function expression or an exists expression, and one of those tests would produce a Boolean, a JSON Boolean value, which is the true or false, and then that would make the expression true and false a valid JSON expression, which we decided not to do because we didn't want the JSON literals to be valid in valid operands for the logic operators.
Right, we wouldn't change that because that's prevented by the syntax. But
Glenn's been trying to get in for a while. Can we hear from Glenn?
Can we?
I was just going to respond to Tim's question about the invalid typing example in table 15. I kind of can see where that's going, but the more general case is if you have an optional value, such as returned by length, and you wanted to compare it against a literal like 1 or 10, I'd want that to be valid. So I don't really see a distinction between an optional value which returns an integer and an optional Boolean returning true or false.
But the integer you're returning from length is sort of not in the same category as an integer literal in an integer value in a JSON document. I mean, it strikes me that the namespace, if you will, the space of function results is not the same space that you of field values.
But the question is, can we compare them or not?
Yeah, right now, function results are allowed as comparables.
Yeah.
I would say that a function that returns a value should be allowed as a comparable, but a function that returns a test Boolean should not be allowed as a comparable.
Okay, but how about a function that returns an optional value?
So optional value right now you've defined as a value or the optional Boolean. And I'm saying that optional Boolean needs to be its own thing, like optional node is.
What you just said is not true.
No, optional value is either a value or nothing.
Okay, optional node or value.
So we already have to allow that for singular
No,
paths.
optional value is optional. Okay, so it says optional Boolean is a subtype of optional value. I think that's wrong.
Yeah, because you're making that distinction. We're trying to tell you that you don't have to make that distinction.
Yeah.
So in implementing all of this, which I have gone through and implemented all of this in order to support the test cases that I'm writing, I had to make this distinction in order to check syntax. I had to come up with, because I'm in object-oriented, I had to come up with classes and everything that represent the test Boolean and a value. I had to come up with all these things in order to get this to work properly, but it only works properly if it only works properly with all those syntax checks if we make a distinction between Boolean and value.
So are you saying that if we made that last item in table 15 valid, then you couldn't implement it?
I could not implement it with the syntax checking, no. I had it implemented without syntax checking, and when I went to go put in syntax checking, those two last examples conflicted with each other. I could not have both of them.
Okay. So there's two possibilities. Either it's the spec is inconsistent, or the implementation has a problem.
So to pull the type system into the syntax check, you have to know all the types of function extensions.
Yeah. And there are two types of functions, a function that can return a Boolean or a function that can return a value.
Well, there are a few more types. Could return an optional node list.
Okay, well, in terms of where it can appear in the expression, those are the only two options. For syntax checking, you only care where it can appear in the option or in the expression. You don't care if it can return nothing or if it can return a node list. Is it valid in a comparable, or is it valid being operated on by one of the logical operators? I maintain that it cannot be both. We have to choose one.
The syntax that is defined by the ABNF right now allows function expressions in 3 places. And one of them is the one where you only get valid by returning an optional Boolean.
Right. So
I think you're right. You're right, Greg. That this issue is deeply connected to the previous one that we haven't yet written.
Is there a chance to get to a result during this discussion, or should there be raised an issue?
we already have these issues.
I already put in issue 388 to capture the ambiguity sub-issue, and we don't have an issue yet that discusses whether test booleans and JSON booleans are the same thing or different things.
I'm saying that we've already decided that, though. We decided that long ago because you can't put true and false. We decided that, and then we put it in, to your point, we put it in the A and BF that you can't have those literals in there because those literals are comparables, not tests.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you're saying, Greg, is that the philosophy was that direction for literals, and we've chosen a different philosophy for the function expressions.
Correct.
Yeah, and I agree, and I did point that out when we put in that shorthand. I said this will cause issues to come out of the woodwork because it's a different philosophy. I didn't use those words, but I, could see that this was coming. But nevertheless, what we've got is consistent, even though it's, sorry, it's not consistent. It works. It can be implemented, even though it's kind of slightly inconsistent the way it's phrased.
I think the solution to this is to have different A and BF types for functions that can act as a test and functions that can act as a comparable.
Yeah, the problem is that these parse exactly the same way. So that creates this ambiguity issue.
It's not
Well,
ambiguous, I think.
if we're going to require that function types be declared, then there's no problem, right? Because then the parser has to know the function type.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I ended up doing in my implementation. If you were to create a custom function, you'd have to decide which type of function it is and implement it that way. And I had to do that for the 4 functions that we have.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. If you flip things around a bit and you say that we are essentially writing an ABNF template, and depending on what function extensions are available, that fleshes out the ABNF concretely in different ways. So the actual match, for example, would be part of the ABNF, and it would occur in some legs and not in others. But that's a bit mind-blowing, personally.
Yeah, there are also almost no tools that can do that. So
yeah,
generally you fix the syntax at the BNF level, and then do all the consistency processing at this first semantics level that is sometimes also called syntax. And that's what tools do. So I don't think we can have the ABNF change dynamically with new function extensions.
I think I'm going to have a crack at it. It sounds like a challenge, and I seem to be up to that challenge.
Yeah, but it would be nobody could implement that. So why would we want to do that?
I have already implemented it.
I don't think so.
Okay. You're welcome to look at my PR and my implementation on that branch.
Yeah,
I have
go
already
ahead.
implemented this.
But I can tell you already that I'm going to be violently opposed.
Sorry, what are you violently opposed to specifically?
Having the type of the function create different ABNF rules for different function registrations.
Well, okay, but you could imagine having an ABNF where you have different tokens for a test Boolean function and a comparable function.
Yes. That's what I want to avoid. I can imagine that, and that's exactly what I want to avoid.
Why do you want to avoid that?
Because it means that you cannot parse something until you know what the function extensions actually have as a type.
And why is that bad? Pardon me, I'm not being rhetorical.
We're having a registry of functions, so functions should be well known by the time, before you enter parse.
I mean, if you
Well-
don't know a function, you can't even begin to process the JSON path, right?
Well, that's actually depends on what your definition of process is.
You can't do anything useful with it.
Well, I can put it into a processing chain. So, for instance, I could convert the JSON path syntax to some JSON structure that I then hand over to an AST interpreter. So I'm not sure that we would be significantly restricting the freedom of different styles of implementing this by making the type decisions for functions during parsing time. That's something that I cannot really agree with. So if we had sigils or something like that would clearly separate functions that can be used as test expressions from functions that can be used as value expressions and from functions that can be used as node expressions, then we could pull this off. But I'm not a big fan of doing that kind of marking.
Yeah, you're getting into Perl territory there.
Yes.
Having said that, these things feel these different types of functions, these different classes of functions feel very different in the way you would use them. And so it bothers me that you can't reflect that fact in the specification of correctness.
Well, we have defined the validity to take into account the function types, both the return type and the argument types.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
My concern
Can-
here is the return type. How does it function with how does what is the role of the function within the expression, basically? And there are two possibilities here. It
Three.
can
There's at least two. Anyhow,
I
what are
see
your
two.
two?
It can be a comparable, or it can be a test. It can be one or the other. What's the third one?
A path, which can be both a comparable and a test.
Functions. I'm just talking about functions.
Yeah, functions can return nodes or node lists.
That's a comparable. Oh no, it isn't.
You can
That would
use
be
a
test.
singular path as a comparable.
Yeah.
You can use any path as a test expression.
Okay. So you can use any path as a test expression. Yes. So if a function were to return a node list, it would act as a test.
But if a function returns
my point is a function can only act as a test or act as a comparable. It cannot act as either.
Well, actually, if it returns something that has the properties of a singular path, then it can act as either.
Yeah. I tried to flesh this out a bit in the function extension section, the type system, and talk about the representation. There in the notes there, I talk about optional node is an abstraction of a singular path, and optional node or value is an abstraction of a comparable. So the philosophy was to try and make functions returning those types, optional node or value, fit anywhere in the syntax where comparables fit. And same for singular path. And that was what was behind those comments in the ABNF.
I don't think it makes sense to have a function potentially act as both. I think a function needs to be defined to act as either a comparable or a test.
Any function that acts like a singular path can actually do both.
Yeah.
And we also, in the current text, we also have functions that return optional booleans that have that property. But even if you take that away, we still have singular path style functions, function returns that can act as both.
And they act as a Boolean if the thing they identify exists or not?
If it is used in a test expression, then it acts as a test. If it is used in a comparable, then the node is taken, its value is extracted, and this is fed into the comparison, like with any other path already.
Okay, that seems undeniable. Do we need to take this to a written form of communication so that we can?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's our action item coming out of this then? Is for do we have a sufficient repertoire of issues? Do we need to raise a new issue to?
No, I think continue it.
Okay,
So
we have sufficient issues.
Test Boolean versus JSON Boolean and the parsing ambiguity. And these obviously interact strongly, but we need to resolve both.
Carsten,
I don't think they interact at all.
Okay. Carsten, can you take an action to add the description to both those issues, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
My day today is a bit full, but I hope I can get to it by the end of the day.
No, it doesn't have to be today, but I feel that we have to capture that your understanding of the parsing ambiguity stuff, because I haven't quite grasped that yet, and not sure anybody else has.
Yeah, there's a fuzzy spot here. Okay. Okay, so we're agreed we're going to take this to written form. And we have the existing issues that we need. So I encourage everybody to dive in there and explore the space.
Yeah, I think all those 5 issues are deeply related.
Well, I think we've sorted 366, haven't we? We whack type on the end and we're done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. You're right. Yeah. So all these 4 issues from 385 to 389 are deeply interrelated.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's all give it a best effort to get this thing sorted out in issue discussion. My only contribution is, can we please have examples in all the arguments? I think forcing the existence of examples forces people to be more concrete, and that's a good thing.
Yeah.
I would also like to have an example of a function returning a node list. I'm thinking about a possible example, but I have no idea.
Does somebody have such an idea? Because I echo what Stefan said. I can't imagine one.
Oh yeah, remove duplicates. So that takes a node list with duplicates and gives you one back with the duplicates removed.
And sorting, and I think there are a lot of other applications.
Would those be useful in a filter expression?
Yes, this would be also my question.
Maybe remove duplicates could be, if you're saying, if you do like a count remove duplicates is greater than 1.
Yeah, counting the unique occurrences of or something or other.
Yeah, this seems edge casey but useful.
Okay, I don't want to forget. Maybe it's a trivial question for you. Do we have versioning with JSON path?
Do we have what? There was a noise there.
Versioning? There are some comments where there was talked about JSON path version 2.0 or something like that. Do we have versioning with JSON path or not?
Not in the traditional sense of versioning. We can look to, in the future, redo the specification, but we have to accept that RFCs are immutable.
Yeah, we could put a
Okay.
version number into the JSON path expression, but that sounds really ridiculous to me.
Yeah.
So you can imagine doing things like having, in JSON path version 2, the expressions begin with $2 signs, right?
Yeah, so this would strictly be versioning in the sense of preventing false interoperability, which is always something that's worth doing. But
Okay.
mostly when people think about versioning, they think about something that has some levels of both backwards and forwards compatibility. And
Yeah.
I'm having a hard time imagining how that would work.
Okay, just to be clear, I don't want to have versioning. So I think we all agree here about
Good.
this fact. Okay.
Yeah.
Another question is about that index function. There was an issue. I'm not sure what was the reason to close this issue. I think that would be a very useful function. I would say more useful than the count function. What do you think?
So one issue is that when people bring up examples for that, they suddenly notice that they didn't want a filter, something that you can put into a filter expression, but they want a selector.
No, I don't want a selector. I just
yeah, but all reasonable examples that people have come up with actually want a selector.
But we
so
have arguments against the latter.
Yeah, so I think we do have agreement, even though we didn't state that explicitly, that we do not want to make this step at this point in time.
Yes, we agree.
So this would be significant innovation, although there are other people who have something like the tilde operator and all that, putting that in a way that it fits into our current framework would be a significant step. So back to the filter expression case, I think that there aren't that many convincing use cases. Because generally you can just restructure your expression in such a way that you use selectors to go there. Again, the problem is that you only can filter on the things. So in the end, you will have a Boolean value. And the question whether a path with some selectors in it returns a value is usually as good as going through an index function in a function extension. So you would need to construct a pretty elaborate example that doesn't have that property. So I also defined how we could add something like indexing to index access to the function extension framework. because essentially the index function gives you the last segment of the normalized path representation of the node that you are looking at.
Yes, exactly. It's very easily to implement.
Yeah, if you agree to the fact that a function should have access to the normalized path, well, it already has access to the node itself, but right now we essentially don't have in our model that the function can get at the normalized path of that node, and that would be a new thing. We currently are completely mute about that, so we would have to forgive implementers who think they can do that. But I think we need to make up our mind whether that's a good thing or not.
No, I don't think that we formally allow a function to access a normalized path. It can be simply implemented like that under the hood. Getting a value, you will the implementation will build successively the normalized path internally because it's unique to get to that value. And the last step before getting the value will be to get the key, the index, the name, because that's the key to get the value. So you have it without formally being allowed to access or build the normalized path. You did it already.
So the use case in that last comment there, I think, is very compelling, where the person who wants to be able to write a path that does this doesn't actually have access to the processing to the logic that's processing the JSON path. They are interacting with an API that says, all right, give me a JSON path that's supposed to return a value, and I'm going to use that value this way. And they want to be able to get the key as that value. Currently, because JSON path doesn't have that capability in the syntax, they can't do what they want to do through this API.
Just to be clear, I don't want to use this index access outside of filters. I just can imagine to think about this very useful index function, whatever it's called.
Right.
But if we agree, with the majority of us agree to not add it to the function we already have, where I think index would be more useful than the count function. So, okay, I see that that filter functions or function expressions can be added also later to JSON path. So it's okay.
Yeah. I don't think that adding an index function that's only usable within filter expressions addresses any of the issues that we've seen from users. I don't know that it's worth doing that work right now.
I
do see
explicitly
value in
ask,
it. I just don't see the point in doing it right now when it doesn't address what users want.
I explicitly ask for an example, a use case I didn't see till today, use case. So I don't see the value of a tilde operator, tilde expression. But inside of
So I
filters,
think that as Glenn said, adding that kind of new syntax is outside of our scope at the moment.
yes,
If we could meet these use cases through the existing function mechanism, that would be great. But we're not going to go further than that, I don't think.
I agree.
Okay, folks, what are we then done? Or so I think we know what we're going to do with these. We're going to take them to a deeper discussion. What else do we have that we can usefully put our time to at this point?
If and or when we plan any interim meeting.
Why don't we push that on the stack for the moment and see if we can sort this mess on the
Okay.
screen out? Because if we can, then an interim meeting would be as a consequence of wider last call feedback, and that we'd have to wait and see when and if that comes.
Yeah, I mean,
If people on the screen want to go ahead and schedule it, that's fine. But
no, I'm not advocating we do it, but I'm just sort of wanting to get a sense of where to go now, because if we think that these are the last outstanding issues, the ones that these issues that we've talked through today, then actually we probably don't need a cadence of interim meetings, provided that we can get these addressed in a timely manner.
I agree.
Yes.
Okay, in that case, I think we are done for this time. The floor is open for additional business, if there is any.
So just to be clear, suppose we do get these issues resolved to our satisfaction and we've got clear consensus. We don't need an interim meeting to trigger a last call. Is that correct?
No.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
The last call is triggered via email and the data tracker.
Okay.
And it'll be a 2-week period, and then after that closes, we'll go through the rest of the formalities of submission.
Okay. So in what I'm getting at is we can agree to initiate a last call via email.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Sounds like we're done here.
Okay, in that case, thank you everybody for your time, and I look forward to wrestling this thing to the ground.
Yep.
In email. Examples. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.